Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. Well, decisions are slowly being made or options eliminated in the choice of which version of dome I want to attempt. The one that has risen to the top is this version here, where we have a threaded rod that goes through a metal dowel that has its own thread cut into it, and the threaded rod goes into that dowel and it locks it in the strut itself, and then we can bang a nut on it on this end and tension it up to our heart's content, making a very strong, simple and clean interface. High on the consideration was this option where we would put a threaded rod into a pilot hole and then wind it into the fibres. Well, that has been 100% eliminated from my option list, because I went out to the garage and just between odd jobs that I was doing, I thought, I'll give that a go, and I threaded in an 8mm rod into a hole, and it didn't work. It stripped the actual threads, the fibres out of the timber. Now I was a little surprised it did it, but not really, because I've been banging on about that sort of possibility. But I was quite surprised. So I drilled another hole, slightly smaller, and tapped it with an 8mm tap, and then I went to wind the threaded rod into the tapped hole in the wood, and it went in nicely, and I was thinking, okay, so it's still a winner, until it hit the bottom, and then straight away it stripped the fibres out of the timber. Now that piece of timber was seasoned, which is ideal, is what we should be using, and that was my thought. You've got to be careful that what works today may not well work in 6 months or a year's time. If we use the timber that took a threaded rod, and while in use it dried out and seasoned in the sun, etc., it could well be a problem waiting for the right conditions so that it can fail. And that's what I was concerned about, kind of, but it was graphic today when I did the experiment, and it failed almost immediately. Now that was in direct parallel, the wee sample that I did was in direct parallel to the fibres of the timber, whereas this one cuts across it. So this is, you could say, a little bit less prone to that issue, but nonetheless eliminated. This one, however, has risen to the top. If I use a hub, and I've been flip-flopping whether I will or not, but I've got a feeling I will. But if I use a hub, this takes precedence. It allows for a pre-drilled hole close to the diameter of whichever threaded rod dimension I use, probably a 10 or a 12, and then we can simply thread a metal dowel, a rod, whether it be pipe or a solid piece of steel. Not particularly hard to do, and as I said, it's neat and it's uncluttered. Then, if we desire, we can run our long timber, a specifically designed screw for this sort of use here, and it does get a jolly good bite into the timber, into the fibres. The reason I was wanting to have the combination of these two is that this top rod can be put in after the general assembly of the other struts. Now I've shown that I've got two separate rings here. It doesn't have to be. I was just going through a bit of an exercise, and what I was concerned about, if we just show the point that if I just zoom in there, we need to be able to get access to the head of the screw from outside, and we can on this one as an example, so good for that. This, however, is a 140mm diameter pipe, and I'm trying to get it down to the it's a 50mm inside diameter, so it's about 114mm on the outside, so I have to rescale things, because the smaller the pipe gets, the harder it is to get your insertion point for your heavy screw and screwdriver. So that has taken precedence and is the one that I probably will give a little bit more thought on going forward. Now, I have looked at several different iterations of where you use a strap and it comes up and it can be bolted in the center together with the other straps of the struts. Now that really does appeal to me, but the aesthetics of it is less appealing, whereas this, I think, it's got its aesthetic properties that I like. Simple, cheap, doable in the workshop, I would suggest. Buy the pipe, find out where you need to put your, and that's easy through use of SketchUp, where you need to put your holes, and have at it. Okay, so that's good. This is the alternate, however. This is a bit of, don't worry about the two different sides, that's just, one was a 75 and one was a 100mm side, but think of this as a box section, rectangular box section that has one end cut off of it, or one edge of it, one side of it, and that can slip over the strut and be screwed or bolted through, so that it has a very secure interface between the strut and the hub, because you can then insert your bolt, a short bolt, on the inside, have the head recessed in the timber, and then we can put our nuts on that and tighten up to the heart's content, and that makes a very secure and quite tidy strut hub interface. So the two have got their merits, don't they? This is a standard box section dimension of 50 by 100. It could be a 2.5mm wall, just ideal for what we want if we're using 45mm timber. If it happened to be 50mm timber, well, then we just put a little rebate into the strut end, and we carry on as if there's no difference between this or a heavier timber. Ditto that if I want to go, instead of this 100mm thick timber, well, this actually might be 90 even, but if I wanted to go to 140 or 150mm deep, nothing changes. The length of the hub just gets a little bit longer, and the separation of the bolts, of course, change as well. So that could be a really easy option. So it probably would mean making a mock-up of each and finding what the reality is. The hub is the same for both. Yay, that's a thumbs up. This is, now let's just check what the diameter of this, that's 140mm diameter. Here's the problem. If I get rid of that, it's the proximity of these two struts. The other one's got a little bit of wriggle room, so if we are using a 50mm wide box section, this becomes an issue. It's not something you could shave the corner off and get a bit closer. So I'll have to redraw this with the smaller hub and see how things go. Whereas with the previous one that I'd shown, that previous option where we've got this the steel dowel in the side and the threaded rod going through it, if the timbers were to get a bit close to each other, they can be trimmed. And besides which, they don't have this extra bulk to the other option, so it has its own merit. Now, I think I had a look at this option, and I mentioned where you have the straps, and now there's several ways of doing it. Having them extend right out to the center and bolt it together, good idea. Or have them on a plate so that they can be individually bolted. And you see a lot of those type of both of those options being used. A little bit of fiddle, not insurmountable, getting the bend right, but we want to be able to ideally leave the struts at the geometric correct placement and have the tabs bent to accommodate that placement. Otherwise, what tends to happen is if you have all your tabs compressed up together, it'll lift or lower the struts out of its geometrically correct position. Not really a problem possibly in the real world, but that's a consideration. I actually quite like that. It would be cheap. You'd need the way to bend these at the correct angle would be to use an inclinometer attached to the steel and then bent to the desired angle until the inclinometer gave you the correct reading. So certainly easy enough to do that, but that may be the stronger option, or the dowel. So I've got options coming out the yin-yang. Okay, so that's where we're at the moment. It was more to do with the failed threaded rod into the timber, and as I said, even if it were to thread in today, with the drying of the timber over time, would the fibres become brittle and allow, once the dome was put under strain, allow those threaded rods to pull and cause issue. And my contention would be, let's not even try to test that theory. Whereas that steel dowel through the side so that the threaded rod can go into it has a lot of merit, and it does look particularly neat. It's neater than this, and that may be what swings it back to the threaded rod option. Okay, that's it. Onwards and upwards. A little bit further ahead, but not really. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye now.